You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Jerome Corsi, and today it is Tuesday. It's July 8th, 2025. Thank you for joining us on CorsiNation.com. You can follow me on X at CorsiJerome1, and you can follow us on Substack at JeromeCorsiPhD.substack.com. A lot going on today, and one of the big stories remains this Epstein story. Oh, by the way, you can see my new shirt. It says this is where we're headed. We're going to be creating these American Patriot Villages. Okay, and American Patriot Villages are under the auspices of the Veterans First, which we have also created. I'm chairman of Veterans First, and Josh Macias, who headed the Veterans from Trump, is going to be the CEO, not the CIA, but the CEO. And you can see here where I'm right now in Georgia, and we're going to be creating, I think, our first real institute, and then different villages where we're going to have veterans. We're going to have work with the people who are former prisoners and people who are in public housing to get them a transition, a structured transition where they can come into civil society productively. And we'll be funding that, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that. We're going to be having our website's going to be going live very quickly on. It'll be all under the auspices of the America First Project. We have the America First Foundation launching. And I want to announce that on August 7th, which is the day in which we celebrate and honor those Purple Heart recipients who have suffered injuries and are defending the United States of America, we're going to have an event. It's going to be essentially a backstage game. It'll be a 21 card game, but it's not gambling. There's going to be a donation required to participate in the event. But in the event, we're going to have 21 game being played by a dealer who's live, and it will be a event that you can have points. You'll get a certain number of points, and you can bet it, see how many points you can accumulate. There'll be prizes given, but even more importantly, there'll be appearances of Purple Heart veterans who are coming on to say hello and tell their story. We'll be honoring past Purple Heart veterans. It's going to be this. We're going to have organizations participating in this throughout the veteran community, including the VFW lodges. We're going to be having wide participation, and groups that are interested, we're going to have a way on the website. We're going to be posting on Corsi Nation how you can get involved. If you want to be an affiliate, if you've got groups that you would like to bring in and get some of the donations to your group, you may qualify, and we'll be happy to do that. But we want to get a lot of people participating. We want to make this a major event. I remember watching the Jerry Lewis telethons for years on television when he was raising money for muscular dystrophy. And if we get this kind of a charity event going, where people are donating, there's not going to be no winning and losing from gambling. There's going to be certain prizes given by those who want to sponsor the event. But I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a uplifting event for the entire community. And then through this year, you're going to learn more about our America First organization, and we're going to be creating 150, hopefully, of these communities, these American Patriot Villages throughout the United States. That's a major announcement, and I'm beginning to really this is going to be largely full-time to get this involvement going, to build this organization. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to do so. Thank God that we have Donald Trump in the White House and can celebrate our valiant warriors who have defended this country for so many years to defend our freedom. All right, now let's get into the news. There's a couple of stories dominating the news. The major one continues to be this Epstein story. And in general, the story that there was no client list, no evidence that Epstein was blackmailing prominent figures, that Epstein killed himself and was not killed. And that's what Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi are saying. The story is just not panning out. I mean, there's too much evidence out there where Pam Bondi and others have said we have the client list, we have the information, and we're going to release the data. And then suddenly something emerges where that data becomes so toxic it has to be suppressed again. Now, I've got some pretty good ideas of what's involved here, and it has major international significance. This is an international event. I'm sure that Epstein was an agent for both the CIA and Mossad and other intelligence agencies. And clearly, every aspect of what he was doing is a classic honeypot scheme where he's preying upon the predilection of our elites for pedophilia and providing them underage minors in order for sex and filming it and flying him on his airplane. And, that it's all documented. He lived in a very prominent New York apartment that occupied a whole, one of these townhouses in New York City that are multi-million-dollar properties. And when you go inside, he has a picture of Bill Clinton in a blue dress wearing high heels, as in drag. So the whole thing is, the American public aren't going to buy this. And it's only going to hurt the credibility of Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino. We're going to take a hit for this, even if they were ordered to do so. And that order had to come directly from up high, very up high. And it doesn't settle easily with me because biblically, I believe that the truth always comes out. And I've spent my career pursuing the truth. And so therefore, I think this is a story that the pressure is going to build, and there's going to be some backlash from this. I don't think it's going to go away immediately. The news cycle usually takes a story like this and plays it out until something else overwhelms it in the news cycle. And of course, the CIA is very good at manipulating another story to get this one off the news. And so I would suspect that's what's going to happen. At the same time, I don't expect the story to go away. So we're going to follow this and see exactly what the outcome of this is. But at stake is whether or not we're going to get legitimate investigations out of the Trump administration. And I think one of the key facets of the failure of the first Trump administration was Donald Trump allowed the deep state operatives to come in and convince them, oh, no, you can't release all the JFK papers, even though he promised to do it over and over again. Well, the second term, he comes in and says, I'm releasing them all. Well, the second term, Donald Trump has got to be understanding that when the deep state operatives, which are still abundant in the government, that we've only fired about 10% of the federal government. We need to fire 90%. These legacy employees are not going to work for you. They're going to just wait until you leave. Then look at somebody that they like Biden, and they can destroy the country and go back to work. Don't think that climate change is dead and gone, or that the child sex changes are dead and gone. These people will just wait their time, and they'll figure 4 years is 4 years here or there. They're looking for the next 50 years, the next 100 years of change. Okay, and so this, again, I think is something that we're going to follow very carefully. A couple of other stories I was not horribly pleased with yesterday. Donald Trump reversed his idea that our stockpiles of weaponry had been depleted by the Ukrainian war. He decided to ship more arms, missiles, and ammo to Ukraine. Well, that's a bad idea. I'm sorry. I don't know what Donald Trump's got in mind. I know he doesn't want Putin expanding the war. But at the same time, the war is going to continue by Zelensky as long as Zelensky has an opportunity to get money and get weapons. Now, there's a very good article over here on Zero Hedge today. They're both saying that, the FBI concluding that Jeffrey Epstein had no clients, didn't blackmail anyone, and definitely killed himself. I don't see anybody buying this. So far, the argument is it's not going to sell. And so therefore, I think this is going to have to be very seriously thought of. And you still got, Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, and she might spill the beans as to what is really being protected here. And I think when that comes out, that's not going to be particularly favorable if Donald Trump does not manage this very correctly. And the best strategy here is the truth. And so far, we're not getting any truth, which means that one of the big stories yesterday, and it headlined, was that the DOJ was caught cutting 90 seconds from the 10-hour jail cell tape. Well, that again that is another indication that the FBI is lying and covering up. And that's not what the American people of the MAGA movement elected Trump to do, nor did the MAGA movement elect Trump to expand the Ukraine war. Now, the two stories on Zero Hedge that I'm following are number one, that the money and weapons going to Ukraine have only enriched the oligarchs. Okay, so it's one of the most corrupt countries in the world, recognized as such before the war. But since the war broke out, tens of billions of euros have flown into Ukraine, and the corruption flourished more than ever before. So there's a clique of oligarchs, many of them close to Zelensky, who have become hugely wealthy because they're profiting from the war. And what happens is the money for the weaponry gets diverted. Others, a list now of businessmen who we haven't heard of before, who are Zelensky's buddies. Andriy, it's Stawn. These names are hard until you rehearse them for a while, but there's a list of Ukrainians, oligarchs who are new. Now, what they do is they take the money out of the arms. They don't buy the arms, but they divert the money through corrupt banks, and it gets money laundered into Cyprus and other places where apparently things are being purchased, but the money disappears. Okay, so what's said here in this interview, and this article is at Remax News is where it originates, and the point is they're saying Ukraine is now ruled by an oligarchic regime that increasingly survives on external support. It is a state characterized by rampant corruption and the absence of genuine democratic frameworks. Okay, so you've got almost 87% of the population and 81.3% of the businesses. The level of embezzlement in the country, according to the surveys done and reports done, has increased dramatically since 2022. Okay, so the anti-corruption agency is just not functioning, and corruption is rampant, while at the same time, Russia is advancing and going to take more territory. Eventually, Putin will take Kiev, and the war will largely be over. We will not get this territory back without a nuclear war. The best thing to do is to quit funding Zelensky, cut off his arms, and therefore the war will have to end because he doesn't have international support. And certainly Europe does not have the wherewithal to do it. Europe does not have the wherewithal economically to do it. The other report's very interesting is that out of the United Nations now, reports are coming that any discussions to bring Ukraine into NATO have become, quote, toxic. In other words, the representatives who were before, especially the Eastern Europeans, encouraging Ukraine to be part of NATO are now realize that that will be directly contravened by Donald Trump. And so therefore, the arguments and counter arguments are being presented right now about Ukraine's accession to NATO, but these have become extremely toxic because there is waning American support for Ukraine's military. Increasingly, Zelensky is being seen as a comic actor who is wearing a costume of camouflage suits, and he's looking like he is now a valiant warrior, when in fact the truth is that he's just a joke comic. And this guy has no need to have more money because he's already allowed his wife to go on $1 million at least jewelry buys. I'm sure he has mansions all over the world, probably even in the United States. And again, the American people are sick of this corruption and sick of being told lies by our State Department and by the Soros-funded NGOs that Russia is the aggressor. When going back to 2013, Hillary Clinton, with her private server, was working with Pinochet, one of the oligarchs in Ukraine at that time, and they were funneling money into the Clinton Foundation that Bill Clinton was running while Hillary was Secretary of State, using information and policies the Secretary of State formulated in favor of these oligarchs, provided they paid the Clinton Foundation, and all coordinated through the private email server that Hillary retained. That bribery scheme was also ignored. And it was ignored because of the same reason going on today with Epstein. In other words, the criminals are the government. So the government's not going to indict the government when the pedophilia may trace back to Obama and to trace back to Biden and to Clinton, all involved in this horribly evil trade of children for sex. Now, I'm going to, and I'm in the process of exposing the articles on Act Blue. I may today finish the one which will come to be submitted to American Thinker on how a scheme was developed to take the money from the border, which was opened by direct action of the Obama administration and Biden in conjunction with Pope Francis, on the sex trade, 300,000 unaccompanied minors, the fentanyl from China, Sinaloa cartels, cocaine and crack cocaine, provided revenue the Democratic Party channeled into banks and got out through a mortgage banking scheme to fund anti-American NGOs like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. We'll be reporting more on that in the coming days. So, Chris, you want to come on? We've got a clip I'd like you to play, and you might want to comment on what we've talked about so far.
Well, this is what we have. And it's funny, the Ukraine war hasn't really been in the headlines, and Donald Trump wants to extend or at least bring more arms over there. Not sure why. I thought he didn't want to spend more money on that sort of thing, but we'll see. This might be something where this might be something for show as well. We'll see what happens. Although Russia, again, Putin and Russia are making more inroads into the nation as well. So
Well,
I guess, yeah,
He probably wants to communicate to Russia,
right.
enough is enough. I mean,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Trump wants to stop these wars in order to get to peace. And he has gone on and off about whether or not arms should go to Ukraine or shouldn't go to Ukraine. He's gone back and forth on that. And so he's now trying to give a little bit more arms and see if that will influence Putin. That's the best I can figure out. And I think that Trump is going to do the same with Netanyahu, who met in the White House yesterday. I'm sure there'll be pressure to stop incursion in Gaza, but Trump is also not going to let Iran resume developing nuclear weapons. He's not going to let Hamas return to Gaza. Chris?
Agreed. And another way he can also threaten Putin or Russia is to threaten to produce more oil. The fact is, if the U.S. Provides an alternative to Russia and, yes, the Middle East, as far as buying or buying oil with other nation from other nations, or excuse me, selling oil to other nations, then all of a sudden these nations get economically weaker. That's tougher for them as well. And hopefully, the administration keeps concentrating on that too.
Well, it's clear that, that Israel, with our help, and that B-2 strike has taken Iran out of the nuclear game for today and for the indefinite future. Now, it's also clear that Trump is not going to put up with the mullahs going aggressive again, and it could bring Iran to its knees by oil sanctions and trying to cut off the capital, the need that Iran relied upon from Obama and John Kerry in order to fund terrorism. It's also clear that Hamas has been deeply destabilized, as has Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Assad has gone from Syria. So this is a low point for radical Islamic terrorism in the Middle East. And Trump is in kind of a pause phase where his next move, I think, is going to be to reinvigorate the Abraham Accords and start reaching out to countries like Libya in order to expand those willing to accept Palestinians. I saw the first story on that yesterday on Reuters. And Reuters is already pointing out that, in fact, Trump is moving quickly not to repopulate the Gaza with the same problems we've always had, but in order to get a different solution in the Gaza, which will be to make sure Hamas does not operate and these tunnels between Egypt and Hamas and the Gaza are not used to rearm a Palestinian Authority. I think Trump is going to try to destroy the Palestinian Authority. And that movement we heard yesterday out of Hebron, where the various Muslim leaders were saying that they don't want the Palestinian Authority back. These are significant movements, and we've got to give it all time to play out a little more. I want to play the clip you've got here, Chris, next, but I want to make one more point, and that is I'm going to still insist that Donald Trump needs to go to Texas and work with these people who have been damaged by these flash floods. He needs to bring in FEMA. He needs to show that we've got massive support. We go down to the border into Texas in the area that was hit by the floods with Governor Abbott and pledge support. If he does that, he's going to show that he's not going to be like Biden and that the people of North Carolina suffer in a hurricane. And if FEMA can't handle it, then get rid of FEMA. But I think we need to resume this whole policy of reducing the federal bureaucracy by department. Okay, and so Trump is well on these themes. We just got to watch, I want to give him enough time here before we start criticizing him to see how these games are going to be played out. The one that disturbs me the most is I do not like a Trump cover-up ordered in the Epstein affair. Even if he can say there's a political reason why it's justified, I'm not comfortable with the outcome. And I don't think it will succeed because the American people are going to keep chipping away at this. And unless some other massive story takes over the national and international news, this is going to play out over the next few days with more and more evidence being brought forward that Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino are engaging in a cover-up, and they weren't put there to do that. It raises questions about their capacity to investigate in the future. And Donald Trump is playing a strategy here, which he'd be well advised to reevaluate. And so I'm hoping that will be done. And I'm hoping he will go to Texas and handle this issue to show the American people that we're not going to abandon the American people in crisis. Okay, Chris, let's play this. Let's play this clip you've got because I think it's very interesting.
Well, what's going on, as you know, the battle between the far leftists, some in charge of far left blue cities, and the immigration services, ICE, of course, and Donald Trump has escalated. You have national leaders, wannabes like Zoran Mamdani, of course, but national leaders of big cities like Karen Bass, and again, I'm using the term leader in its most loose sense, but she decided to go straight to some, I guess, a park or whatever, MacArthur Park. Somebody must have left the cake out in the rain over there, and and she wanted to try to tell ICE agents to get out. Maybe
MacArthur Park is a big drug park in LA. It's where there's a lot of illegal immigrants. I've actually been with the LA police in MacArthur Park looking at the Maras, the gangs, and I rode in squad cars. They made me wear a flak vest because they were all concerned about possible stray shootings or intentional shootings. LA has got areas which are unmanageable because the police have abandoned them or are not sufficiently supported or funded to be effective in cities like San Francisco and LA. But you can see why when we play this clip. So the woman, her name is?
Oh, that's the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass.
Well, I can hardly wait for this. Let's play it.
So I am going to say.
Mayor Bass, I need to get my phone and we're departing.
Okay. All right. Statement, Mayor Bass. Mayor Bass.
Mayor Bass.
Oh my
Any
God.
comment, Mayor Bass?
Thank you.
Mayor Bass,
Yes, my comment is they need to leave, and they need to leave right now. They need to leave because this is unacceptable.
Who did you speak with?
Just wait and see.
Mayor Bass,
They will be leaving soon.
Mayor, who did you speak with on the phone just now? Who did you speak with on the phone?
I had a customer.
Wow.
So she's saying ICE needs to leave right now.
Yes, she's saying ICE needs to leave. She's in MacArthur Park. I guess now that what you were talking about here, I guess leaving the cake out in the rain, you might as well leave it there because it'll get stolen. Anyway.
Right. I mean, MacArthur Park isn't what it was when that song was written.
Eh,
That was the heyday of the hippies, the drugs, and MacArthur Park, and it was then a 1960s, 70s, mostly 60s, revolutionary statement from the Abbie Hoffman type groups of the day, opposing the war, opposing the government. It was one of the first leftist aims to revive what became the Antifa riots and the George Floyd episodes and all these created, incidents of mass civil violence to cause disruption. But at any rate, there's a black mayor who's now saying she doesn't want ICE in the city. So she's supporting and hiding illegal immigrants, which means she's just made herself a target for Tom Homan and the DHS. Because what these mayors and politicians don't realize is they're committing crimes. They're harboring and protecting illegal immigrants, but more importantly, illegal criminal immigrants or aliens. And they're having a policy in the courts which are releasing these criminals back to the streets. And Donald Trump is not going to tolerate this, and neither is Tom Homan. And when the Department of Homeland Security gets its funding out of this new bill that was just passed, the big, beautiful bill, I think you're going to see another effort to search out and deport these criminal illegal aliens in large numbers. So that's coming. A lot of things we're seeing right now today are just prefiguring what we'll be realizing in the fall. Chris?
Exactly, and that's we're going to see a lot more of this. I am under the assumption that the Democrats, the national Democrats, know that these mayors, or whether they get kicked out or not, or they get thrown in jail or not, they can be easily replaced by another socialist sycophantic puppet.
Yeah, we've always got
Coming
men.
and coming and coming, and we'll be setting up martyrs for them. But the fact is, one of these days, this has to stop. We have,
Well,
right?
We've always got Mamdani and Greg Gutfeld. Greg Gutfeld did a number on Mamdani yesterday.
I like him.
He's the poster boy for the woke victimhood, and he really went after him on the late night show.
Yep.
He really ripped into him. The poster boy for the woke victimhood report. He checked off an African American. Mamdani said he was in a Columbia University application. Well, that alienated African Americans in New York City, and so he's lying about his racial identity to get into Columbia.
Yes, yep, that's right. And by the way, the guy's loaded. I mean, he's a hugely rich. Well, his family's rich. His mom's rich. His mom's a Hollywood player, as we've talked about before. And
Right.
he will never have to live with the consequences of his socialist policies. He doesn't have to live near illegals. He doesn't have to.
No,
He
he's
doesn't-
probably not going to ever go into one of the housing projects, and he's probably never going to be in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
And
Okay, so
socialism now is an industry. If you
Yeah,
notice, people are wealthy and making money off the idea of pushing socialism.
and relying upon voter fraud in order to get their positions.
Right.
And I think it's abundantly clear now, especially as we did on God's Five Stones, G-O-D, no apostrophe in the S. Look at the reports, Five, you spell it out, Stones plural, and .com. Look at Andrew Paquette's reports on all these millions of illegal voter registrations of false voters who don't exist that are permitted by these algorithms. That's how the Democrats, I think, have been gaining power for years. Is algorithms have been in the state databases since 2004, 2007, and Trump did have released reports that Christopher Wray hid on the 2020 election that China was interfering in the computers. So now we have a national security emergency, and I believe Trump is setting up to address that in August or September with a new executive order that will demand voter IDs to register, demand we have proof of citizenship, and we go to all paper in everything we're doing in ballots and counting. Now, I want to end by I've got a couple more subjects I want to cover, but on this subject, on this, this Mamdani. So what Gutfeld said is, he said, yeah, I wonder how stupid he really is. I mean, his SAT scores might be lower than Jesse's. Who's he be, Jesse Jackson or Jesse who? But at any rate, but what I love about him. He's not even Ugandan, by definition. You have to have parents or grandparents who are Ugandan. He was born in Uganda, but both of his parents are Indian, which might be the reason why they left. Okay, the gut feel. Well, I said, what's interesting, he didn't say he was Indian because he knew they have the highest mean household income in the United States. He knew that wouldn't help him in the opposition Olympics. He was smart enough to see what could get him preferential treatment. So he adorned himself with a different race, which exposes the lie of identity politics. It's so unfair to be black in America. Why are you pretending to be one? Okay, and so this, I think, is Gutfield's attack is going to be very damaging to Mandami, and Mandami is going to have to plan to win on voter fraud. And New York City, that might be a possibility. But if we have a socialist, anti-American Muslim, poster boy for woke victimhood, elected mayor of New York, you can kiss New York goodbye because it will rapidly deteriorate. A lot of police will just resign. Okay, any final comment on that, Chris? I want to move on to a couple more stories.
Well, again, you see what's happening in Chicago. You see what's happening in Los Angeles. New York is going to be that plus more because it's an international city, and every other nation is going to be, and every other city here in New York is going to be looking at that as the model.
Well, I think we're going to see that the cities, in particular, run by Democrats, are going to come under increasing pressure. And if Donald Trump were, a state like California, a whole state under Newsom, I think Donald Trump may just say go bankrupt, and let these cities go bankrupt. And at some point or other, they're going to have to realize that having homeless in the streets and crime in the streets and businesses leaving, shops and stores and major office buildings largely empty because people don't want to come into the downtowns to work. They're not safe. You're going to find these cities are going to collapse. And Donald Trump, I think, is going to be willing to let them collapse. We have now a $37 trillion debt. And where I want to shift is on economics, because we're seeing early reports coming out of Europe of what I think is going to be a major theme in the fall. So Spain's leading energy companies are saying that they are extremely concerned that the nationwide blackout, the cut power across Spain on April 28th, the government doesn't have any explanation of why it happened, and they're not taking responsibility. So these companies, which are represented by an employers association, ALEC, AELEC, they've denounced these surprising omissions in the official report, because the official report is that all this transition to net zero and trying to go to solar and wind and closing nuclear power plants as Germany did, closing all of its nuclear power plants, is essentially, since the start of the war with Ukraine, they can't completely decouple Europe from Russian energy. They can't get Europe off natural gas and oil, largely which now has to be imported in order to keep their key sectors going, including agriculture, transportation, and industry. Germany is deindustrializing. So the cost of energy is going to cripple these European economies. And these blackouts are no minor issue. I mean, their impact goes from multi-million euro industrial losses to the paralysis of schools, hospitals, transportation networks, and people then are facing higher costs for energy in their lives, which means in the winter they're not going to be able to heat their homes. Okay, so France and Germany are already in the car industry now suffering to stay afloat after they remodeled and retooled to go to these EVs, and these EVs are dead. So we're seeing coming in the fall, I think, a major economic crisis that Donald Trump will, to some extent, prevent in the United States by this bill in which we continue spending. But that's going to have to be only a temporary solution to buy us some time. Okay, now with this debt, and I want to quickly read out to people, get a copy of this free book that I've written with Dean Heskin, and I want to put it up on the website. So, Chris, I'll give them the 800 number, Call Swiss America. I encourage you to get some gold and silver. It will increase in value while your dollar is going to decrease. Gold today is trading at $3,328 an ounce and silver at $36.70 an ounce. And those prices are up, okay, from yesterday. So again, the economic uncertainty that we're going into causes gold and silver to go up. So you're going to see $4,000 gold before the end of the year, and you're going to see silver approaching $40 a year, an ounce by the end of the year. And so that will, any of your money you transfer into gold and silver now, you can expect to appreciate. Anything you leave in dollars, including your IRAs and your 401ks, are only going to have less purchasing powers. So, Chris, if you'll put up on the screen the 1-800 number to get this book, it's 1-800-519-6268. Write it down, 1-800-519-6268. Okay, call Swiss America. They're consultative selling. You don't have to have millions of dollars. Even if you've got a few hundred, they can tell you how to have what you have be worth more because you diverted some into gold and silver. Okay, now the last kind of subject I want to transition to here is that we're facing globally an instability which Trump is trying to control. So therefore, the steps being taken in the Middle East and reintroducing the Abraham Accords, reaching out to countries like Libya, trying to get NATO to assume more of the NATO expenses, which NATO is not going to be able to do, preludes the demise of NATO. Hesitating to fund the United Nations precedes the fall of the United Nations. So Trump is moving decidedly away from globalism, and that's going to continue. But Trump has got to be careful to continue the support of the MAGA party. Now, with Elon Musk forming the American party, this is a foolish move. He's a South African. He's going to gain no support. Elon Musk comes from Silicon Valley. What we have on the website are two books that are going to become very important that we're covering down below. Because if you scroll down, we're covering Mike McCormick's book on the Catholic Church. And that's going to become a major story in Act Blue, because he covers, and we've covered in podcasts before, how extensively the Catholic Church has been involved in dealing with this Honduras, Progress Through Alliance, where Biden put billions of dollars in Honduras, and Honduras just opened the border. Its president was part of the Sinaloa drug cartel, and we get 300,000 unaccompanied minors coming across the border, which is not accidental. And then also Craig Lund, who wrote the book on Silicon Satan. Well, what Craig tells us, anybody who successfully came out of Silicon Valley, like Musk, was part of the satanic cult, or they would not have succeeded. Now, Musk is self-destructing, and he played a role, and he wanted to gain power, but made several mistakes trying to upstage Donald Trump in Oval Office appearances. That's a bad idea. And Musk was not elected president. Well, Musk served his mission was to expose the amount of waste there is in the federal government. We at least got rid of U.S. aid, which was funding many, many causes that were anti-American across the globe. Basically, it goes back to the Obama administration that with John McCain, and I reported this extensively at the time, we created ISIS. And we did that intentionally with arguments that McCain and John Kerry need to be that we needed to support less radical terrorists in the Middle East in order to combat the terrorists we were fighting, like Al Qaeda, etc. All we did was create ISIS. And Obama knew that, and it was Obama's intention from the beginning. Okay, so we're dealing with Musk, who's going to self-destruct. And Musk is, I think, going to lose control of Tesla. The EVs are going to be discontinued, and these global, climate change policies are going to be discredited. That's going to cause economic disruption in the EU. Trump has cushioned on that by passing this bill and by enforcing new regulations which allow for massive drilling and the U.S. energy to bloom. Okay, now we may be able to save Europe from complete failure and collapse in the winter. But again, our oil is going to be more expensive. And Russia will be able to supply some, but the Europeans' own policies are self-destructive. And the EU is collapsing because it never did work. Its globalism is anti-people, and that anti-people determined to reduce the population of the world, as Henry Kissinger did in this number 2000 National Security Memo, which he did in the 1970s. Depopulation, according to Henry Kissinger, was and still is the national official policy of the United States government. And Trump has got to rescind that national security memorandum. Okay, so as we get into this now, Trump has successfully done some reduction of the federal government. He's gotten the war in Ukraine under some control, and we're now advancing the peace agenda in the Middle East. But this is kind of like end chapter 1 and now beginning chapter 2. And beginning in chapter 2, the Epstein cover-up is front and center. So that's going to be the immediate challenge Donald Trump faces. And I think through the next few days, we're going to see that play out. Chris, any final comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, we'll see things play out. It's Donald Trump's made some promises. I do believe that if he takes care of the most important ones, like balances the budget, or at least cuts spending, that sort of thing down the road, we're going to see a lot less of the. I guess we're going to see a lot less complaining about certain things. We are. I suppose the supporters, major supporters, are still going to be upset about the Epstein situation and what's going on there. But the question will be at the end of his at the end of this second term is, will he be a net positive president? And so far, he has been.
Well, I've supported Donald Trump. I've known him for 45 years.
Right.
I've supported him, and I think he's one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met. And I have confidence he's got a strategy here that will make sense when we fully understand all the moving pieces. So I'm just pointing out some, road signs along the way that are caution, and want some thought about these. So Donald Trump is, again, getting somebody and saying that, maybe everything you're being told in Washington is really deep state influence, and give it some second thought, because Donald Trump has been told this before, and every time he's been advised by the deep state, it's been to the deep state's advantage and not to the MAGA party's advantage. Donald Trump right now, I think, there's no one in the world that has the influence of Donald Trump, and there's no one in the world who I trust more to ultimately do the right thing. So I can remain confident that in the end, God always wins, and God will win here too, as long as we continue to follow the advice of 2 Chronicles 7:14 and get on our knees and ask God to forgive us for letting the country get to this point, and to heal our land by hearing our prayer. Dr. Jerome Corsi, this is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025, CorsiNation.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. God bless.